My friends, we are only a few days away from finally learning the fate of the 2020 U.S. Open. Monday, according to all available information out there, the USTA is going to make an announcement regarding the U.S. Open in 2020, whether or not it's going to happen, and what's probably more important for all the players, how strict these COVID-19 preventative measures, these safety precautions are going to be for the players who choose to travel to New York and quarantine themselves in an airport hotel for 2 weeks before they are even allowed to hit a practice ball.
You can't be serious, man. You cannot be serious!
Ever since the cancellation of Wimbledon, I felt like mostly every week it seemed more and more possible that we would get some type of Grand Slam tennis at the end of the summer, whether it be the U.S. Open or the French Open after that in September. Things have looked better and better until quite recently. Covered here by Kevin Mitchell in The Guardian. I think they put it pretty well with this headline. The U.S. Open at risk amid player discontent and stakeholder division. The number one quote in this story is towards the bottom. I'll give it to you right now. According to the Spanish newspaper La Marca, a WhatsApp group of top 100 players revealed no enthusiasm for, quote, traveling to New York and being locked up for a month. Now, originally, the tennis media irresponsibly reported this as a Novak Djokovic problem. Danielle Collins got a little moment of fame. You know, Danielle Collins, that tennis player that no one ever heard of before 2 years ago when she made a run at the Australian Open. She said that, what was the quote? Doesn't matter. She said something like Novak Djokovic is being a crybaby. But if you've been watching tennis for any amount of time at all, you would know that pretty much every player in the top 100 has a team larger than one. And some of these safety precautions that were floated over the course of this week as USTA, ATP, tennis officials were actually having a big teleconference, an online socially distanced Skype call, basically, with tons of top players. They floated the idea that you will have to quarantine for weeks before you're even playing, and you only can have one member of your team, whether that's your girlfriend, your boyfriend, your coach, your physiotherapist, or in Serena Williams' case, your almost 3-year-old daughter. You got to pick one of those very special, important people from your group of very special, important people.
That's not really cool, man.
A lot of players like Novak Djokovic, Serena Williams most recently, basically saying, I don't want to do that. Not worth it to me. On top of that, many of these players are going to be coming from Europe, Australia, all around the world, where all the top tennis players, as we know, outside of Serena Williams, we don't have many top tennis players in the U.S. All the top tennis players are going to be coming from around the world, and they're worried that after being stuck for weeks doing nothing in New York City and then playing the U.S. Open, you go back to Europe to play the French Open, and then you're going to most likely be quarantined for a couple weeks. Again, most tennis players are saying, no thanks. This has presented a huge problem for the USTA. This whole time since Wimbledon got canceled, I was leaning towards we're going to get some form of U.S. Open. Today, I'm leaning towards they're going to cancel it because no top star power wants to come. Of course, we know the horrible news about Roger Federer. He's definitely not playing the U.S. Open. We'll talk about that later in the show. Serena Williams, most recently, has basically said she doesn't want to leave her daughter for several weeks, which I can understand. Rafael Nadal saying pretty much the same thing as Novak Djokovic. It looks like they're going to lose out all of the star power in tennis right before the U.S. Open. So I don't see how they can go forwards with that. And on top of that, we have this now. This was the big news today. Take a look. FoxSports.com Australia headline, Adria Cup, tennis world stunned by crowds, hugging despite coronavirus. The hottest topic in tennis is what precautions need to be taken at the U.S. Open later this year and whether the Grand Slam should go ahead at all. But social distancing wasn't a concern for players in Belgrade overnight as Djokovic and a host of others took part in an exhibition event that featured high fives, hugs, and of course a packed crowd of people. Commentator Nick McCarville, he couldn't believe it. He said it was simply shocking. He was aghast. Renee Denfield, who I still don't... Who is he? You see him on Twitter. Is he some kind of tennis journalist or something? Is he a fan of the sport? Who is this guy? He says, obviously, no social distancing at the press conference. Fans courtside, no social distancing. Different countries, stages of the pandemic, but after months of avoiding human contact like crazy, an event like this is a super jarring sight. New York Times writer and, by all accounts, a nice guy, Ben Rothenberger said, watching the all-human closeness and hugging at the Adria Tour, you almost forget why the tour exists in the first place. Hope it goes well, but golly, gosh darn, does seeing crowds like this make me nervous in June 2020. But Novak Djokovic, he has a pretty good reason to do this, because in Serbia, they've actually, you know, much across the world, come on, let's face it, in recent weeks, we have seen thousands and thousands of people gathering in mass crowds all around the world, mostly in the form of peaceful protests, but we've also seen people go into restaurants. We've seen all kinds of businesses opening. We've seen people who like to wear the masks. I wear the mask especially if I go grocery shopping. I don't want anyone to feel like I'm going to cough on their vegetables while I'm perusing through the cucumber section or the Blaubeeren section or the strawberry, you know, all the sections that they have. But many people are not wearing the masks. Many people are not social distancing. And in Serbia, they said, hey, if you're within 1 meter apart, you're probably okay. And they had a 20,000-person crowd at a soccer match. Novak Djokovic basically said, hey, look, we're allowed to do it in Serbia. I don't make the rules. Let them come. Let them see the tennis. And I can't blame the guy. But unfortunately, as usual, we're having a massive overreaction from people in the tiny tennis media. And I gotta say, at this point, it feels like the U.S. Open not gonna happen now. After this, after knowing that all the star power is pretty much not interested in the quarantine period in New York City, it looks like the only stuff we are going to get, maybe a French Open and stuff like this. Thank goodness for Novak Djokovic and putting together his Adria Tour. Otherwise, we would have nothing. Today on Coffee Break Tennis, we're going to keep things relatively short since Monday we're going to have a video talking about what actually does happen with all this U.S. Open news, but we still got a lot of stuff. Novak Djokovic defends the packed stands at his tennis charity tour. We'll take a closer look at that. Daniel Collins rips Novak Djokovic over his U.S. Open entourage, whining. The truth is, no one likes the stuff that the USTA was proposing, but we'll take a closer look for the sake of fairness here on behalf of Danielle Collins. Jim Courier is on the side that says we need to do our best to show a pathway for tennis to resume. He wants the U.S. Open to happen no matter what, just to get the sport going again. He feels this is actually doing a lot of damage to the brand of tennis not being out there as other sports are getting it going. I mean, come on, they had 20,000 people at a soccer match in Serbia. U.S. Open protocols, incredibly difficult, won't work for Simona Halep. We got that out there. Maybe we'll take a look at that. And of course, my friends, we will talk about Roger Federer, who is not going to be playing at all in 2020, regardless of whether or not there's a French Open or a U.S. Open. Fortunately, Federer's rehab from the first knee procedure led to a slow recovery and the need for a second procedure. But he's on the bright side. He's made it sound like this is basically him just doing what he did in 2016 all over again, which should mean he's going to win the Australian Open next year. So that's okay. We've also got on the other side some news about Roger Federer. A lot of negative stuff out there, some of it not worth talking about, but this Golf Digest piece, of all places, a golf guy is going to tell us what to think. Headline, Roger Federer fans, it's time to start accepting that your man is number 3. We'll talk about that. And finally, a couple things actually. Something that was tweeted to me right before we started doing the show that I got to tell you about because it's pretty funny. A correction from the last show where someone schooled me for getting a challenge. I missed by like less than an inch. The ball was almost on the line for a winner.
That ball was on the line. Chalk flew up.
We'll take a look at that. And one little piece of tennis history we'll talk about at the very end of the show that I think you all like, especially if you've one of the people who have been watching Coffee Break Tennis since the very beginning of the show. You'll probably enjoy hearing the last thing we have in the basket of tennis balls for you today. So let's get right into the Novak Djokovic stuff. And by the way, feel free to comment below on all of this because recently we've been doing videos like every 2 weeks, and comments on one video, by the time I do a next video, they don't really apply to what's going on 2 weeks later, so I haven't really been reading comments like usual. But right now, we're coming back on Monday. So comment below. We will very likely be able to get to comments since they're all going to be very relevant as we get the news on Monday, what's going to happen with the U.S. Open. But let's go to this Novak Djokovic stuff because, you know, when I started this show My idea was, what's a show I could make on YouTube for tennis fans that I myself as a tennis fan would enjoy watching if someone were to do a good job at it? Something that would go beyond the tennis coverage we get from ESPN and Tennis Channel, Eurosport, wherever you are in the world. How could I take it to the next level and dive deeper in these tennis stories that I know people out there are like me and just love tennis and could listen to this stuff all day long? So that was my idea originally. But now I'm starting to realize what Coffee Break Tennis does a lot of times is just sort through all the nonsense. Tennis media is so convoluted and all over the place. It's hard to make sense of what's going on, and it seems like some people can be very misleading sometimes in the way they cover the sport itself and events going on around it. So I'm very grateful for you. I'm very happy for you that you have a show like Coffee Break Tennis to help make sense of all this. And as for myself, all I can say is I've got no one, but heroically I will go it alone, so that you won't have to, wading through all this nonsense. And this illustrates, this is from the foxsports.com Australia piece. I will say they edited this for the Fox Sports US version and actually made it less deceptive and dishonest. But this is pretty egregious stuff. One, let's just start off with this. Quote, Djokovic had no issues holding his event, even in today's climate, nor did he have a problem getting close with his rivals. And it shows pictures of him with Dimitrov and Zverev, and they got their arms around each other. And like literally this makes it sound like he wants to give them coronavirus. Like, you know, Djokovic knows he has COVID-19, doesn't care if he spreads it to his rivals. Maybe it's a tactic to take them down so they won't be able to beat him at the slams. Well, they can't beat him anyways. But you see what I mean? Like, I thought that was kind of dishonest, but this is really taking it to the next level. The U.S. Open is planning on implementing strict biosecurity protocols to ensure the tournament can go ahead safely, such as players only being allowed to bring one member of their entourage. We know about that. But those at the Adria Cup continued to question whether the Grand Slam would be feasible. And the way they're painting this and other places too today, they're making it seem like these players say they don't want to go to the U.S. Open. Even in the Kevin Mitchell piece from The Guardian, his first sentence, or excuse me, I think this is the third paragraph. Many leading players, notably Djokovic, Nadal, Simona Halep, and Nick Kyrgios, say the threat of coronavirus pandemic and severe restrictions. You should have put severe restrictions first, because that's the main issue players have with the U.S. Open right now. The threat of the coronavirus pandemic and severe restrictions on their movement and preparation override career or financial concerns, while the cash-strapped USTA is desperate to hold the event. The men's and women's organizing bodies are supportive but skeptical. And honestly, right here, they're making it sound like these players, you know, they think the U.S. Open is not going to be safe for them, but they have no problem having crowds of people watch them in Serbia, and it's basically saying they're hypocrites. There's been a lot of stuff out there on Twitter, too, from some of these tennis media types like Nick McCarville, making it seem like Djokovic is a big hypocrite. I think he doesn't like Djokovic. I think a lot of people don't like Djokovic. The longer I watch tennis and read the news media about tennis, the more I realize a lot of people in it seem to not like Djokovic, which I think we should all respect Djokovic. Anyways, speaking in, Sasha Zverev says, it's going to be very difficult. I don't think a lot of players will feel comfortable in the circumstances. Team added, some circumstances would have to change to make sense to go there. Grigor Dimitrov said that the conditions need to be safe and make sense for all the players. Health above all. Okay, at least his is regarding health safety. So you could say maybe Dimitrov is hypocritical, but to me it sounds like he's just trying to say the thing that sounds most correct to him. Djokovic suggested he might skip the U.S. Open and restart his season on clay in September. A lot of players are saying that right now, or at least that's the rumor going around. According to Djokovic, he backs that up. Most of the players I've talked to were quite negative on whether or not they would go there, meaning the U.S. Open. For me, currently, as things stand, most probably the season will continue on clay at the beginning of September. I can't stand how they're trying to paint these guys as hypocrites for saying, you know, basically they don't think the U.S. Open is safe, but that's not their main complaint. Their complaint is they don't want to be locked down for 2 weeks of quarantine and then, you know, have to come back to Europe and do it all over again. I think that's extremely misleading and dishonest media coverage, and I think it's horrible. As Nick McCarville said, I find it shocking. I'm simply aghast. And here's more evidence of this from the New York Post. Daniel Collins rips Novak Djokovic over his U.S. Open entourage, whining. This is a serious contradiction, according to Daniel Collins, to the previous comments about having players inside the top 100 donate money to players outside of the top 250. Collins wrote to Djokovic online, No one has been able to play sanctioned events or make money since February. Here we have an awesome opportunity with the U.S. Open talking about proceeding forward with the event with some strict safety precautions to make sure all players feel safe and their health is put first. This is a massive opportunity for players to start making money again. And here we have a top player in the world saying only being able to bring one person with him will be too difficult to bring his entourage. If it's safe to play, we should do everything in our ability to prioritize the health of the players. I think we should support that. It's easy when someone's made $150 million throughout their career to try and tell people what to do with their money and then turn down playing in the U.S. Open. So that's all over the place because, you know, it sounds like she was originally in support of Djokovic's idea to have top players funnel their money, and now she's on the side of Dominic Thiem by the end of this paragraph saying you can't tell other people what to do with their money. Sorry, Danielle Collins, but you're all over the place, and the problem is maybe Danielle Collins is one of the few exceptions. Most of these tennis players don't want to deal with their giant 2-week quarantine and having to leave their entire team at home. The U.S. Open has said they're going to provide you with a physio, but many players said, no, that doesn't work. I want my physio. And it's not just you need a physio at the Open. When you're on the tournament grounds, because if everyone's sharing the same physios, and again, these physios are so hands-on, how is that not a problem? They're going to be touching you. The same physios are touching all the same players pretty much. Anyways, that's a whole nother thing. But my point is, many players say you have to have your physio with you at the hotel room. You got to do a lot of stuff when you're playing tennis at this level, especially as physical as it is. You don't just meet with the physio once a day. And again, there's more rules saying you can only be on the grounds for practice a very limited amount of time. So top players, for their own physical safety, right, to avoid injury, when they play a big event like the U.S. Open best-of-5 sets matches for men, they need these physios with them pretty much everywhere they go, even sometimes to go to the bathroom with them. You could cramp up in there. So a lot of people in the tennis media, they loved that. They piled on and even went as far as to say that Novak Djokovic and players like Nadal and Federer included have some kind of unfair advantage because they've made so much money. Sure, they have an advantage being able to fly private jets and get to the tournaments earlier, not having the financial restrictions of other players on tour. But come on, Novak Djokovic grew up playing tennis in a freaking bomb shelter, pretty much. He's hardly like a rich, privileged kid who was able to take over the sport just because his family had money. It sounds like he's the opposite of that. Djokovic is more of a rags to riches story. So you can throw that one in the trash, Danielle Collins.
Just say, I'm sorry, okay?
Well, I'm sorry, I didn't hear it.
Oh, thank you.
Serena Williams, pretty much the same deal at the New York Post. We've got family restrictions cloud Serena Williams' U.S. Open status. Federer's out. Nadal and Djokovic maybe too. And now Serena Williams' coach, of course, it's coming from Patrick Mouratoglou, who, by the way, I don't even want to get into it today, but he's got some new idea for tennis where they play like 10-minute quarters. It's like a basketball game or something. They have wild cards where they can say if you throw down the card, your opponent doesn't get their first serve, or if you throw down a card, if you win a point, it's worth multiple points. It sounds like a bunch of garbage. Nonsense. That's all I'm going to say about that. I will not watch it. But I will watch Novak Djokovic's Serbian tour tennis. Mouratoglou said, I think Serena will want to play the U.S. Open 100%, but I don't know how she can go there with only one person. He said this to Ben Rothenberglers on the No Challenges Remaining podcast. I don't imagine her 3 weeks without her daughter, so maybe her daughter will coach her. I mean, yeah, good joke there from Patrick Mouratoglou. If you can only bring one person, I think Serena brings her daughter, and that'll have to be her coach. So, bottom line here with the U.S. Open is it's pretty disastrous, and if you have no star power, it almost seems like they can't go forwards. I don't know if local government in New York is a big part of this too. Maybe they're basically being told they have to have these kind of protocols in place to have their U.S. Open with no fans. But to me, if you have no fans already, just let the players bring their full team. That should solve it. If they bring their team, maybe reduce that quarantine time down to 1 week, maybe you could get these players on board. My understanding is that there are ongoing discussions right now as we speak, this weekend, continuing Saturday, Sunday. The U.S. Open basically has to find a way to convince these players to go along with it. Otherwise, there ain't going to be a tournament. So we'll have a show on Monday. And, one more thing on Monday. Click the link below. I'm finally, after years of thinking of this, I'm finally starting a tennis newsletter. On days where I can't do a video, or if I just want to simply get the word out to everyone faster, going straight into your email inbox, I want to let you know when a show is going to come, when I'm going to cancel a show, when I'm going to make a schedule for shows, like if a tournament's going to happen, let you know what days I'm planning on doing a show. The best way to get all this information and the biggest, most important breaking tennis news is down below. If you are a Patreon, I've already put your email into the system, so you will get it right away. If you don't want those emails, you can easily opt out and re-sign up again with the link below in the description below this video. There is a link. Go there now, sign up for the Coffee Break Tennis newsletter, and never miss a thing, never miss a show. I'll give you the updates right there in your email inbox. I know you check it. I check my email like 100 times a day, and most of it is just an obsession with deleting junk mail. So what a joy that would be when I know you're checking your phone for junk mail to see a letter from me or Mr. Goat. Mr. Goat will write some editorials, I'm sure. Jim Courier, we need to do our best to show a pathway for tennis to resume. Jim Courier is of the opinion that the longer tennis goes without being in front of people with its product, the actual tennis and the players, the more people are going to forget about it, right? You got to get out front there. If we can play this tournament, according to Jim Courier, we need to. Talking about the U.S. Open. This is really important for the health of tennis, to stay in front of people. A lot of other sports are opening right now. The PGA Tour is about to start. Even if we don't have all of the players, obviously we're not going to have Roger. Knee surgery. Jeez. I think we will need to do our best to do it safely to show a pathway for tennis to resume. There's going to be lessons that we can learn from this. Maybe the French Open. It's just too important for the jobs in the tennis community if it can get played, and that's going to be decided not just by the USTA, but New York State, New York City. Because if we can, we have to hold the U.S. Open, according to Jim Courier. I agree with him, but unfortunately, as we've been talking about already on the show, I don't see how it's going to be possible if you can't get any top players on board. I mean, who's going to be your big star? You take Djokovic, Nadal, and Serena off the table? Nick Kyrgios already said he doesn't want to go either. He's the one. I will say Nick Kyrgios is the one person who made it sound more like it was about all the protesting and coronavirus, the reason why he didn't want to go. Nick Kyrgios is literally like the only person who probably wouldn't have a problem with the bring one of his best mates as his entire coaching staff for the tournament. Probably wouldn't bother him at all. So he's the only player I can think of who made it sound like it was more of a health decision. Everyone else, including I have this here. I don't know if we got to go through this because we already heard so much, but I'll give you one thing. Darren Cahill says, these restrictions are tough. They're incredibly difficult. Every player will have their own opinion as to whether that will work for them. I'm pretty sure it won't work for Simona. Simona Halep doesn't want to go to the U.S. Open with these restrictions. It's not just Djokovic. If you're in a baseball team or a football team, at least you have your teammates to travel with, to socialize with, eat with, train with. Tennis is a little bit different because it's an individual sport. So, yeah, I mean, Serena wants to travel with her daughter. We all know Federer brings, like, the entire family. All right, like I said, I don't want to go too long on the show today. Probably already gone very long, though. So let's fly through this last stuff, and we'll get out of here. Roger Federer, I thought this was a good piece. I think this is from Herr Peter Bodo at ESPN. Injured Roger Federer might be down, but he is far from out. They quote Brad Gilbert in here a lot, so let's take a listen. I thought that was interesting. Brad Gilbert, BG, says, I'm not going to write him off, but this is concerning. And hey, as a big Federer fan, I'm not going to lie. I think it's concerning too. But I'm pretty comforted by the fact that Roger Federer is basically comparing this whole thing to 2016 and saying that, he could come back sooner, but he wants to do it right, just like he did then, and he's going to make his comeback next year at the Australian Open. I'm totally okay with that, and I think Federer can do it. 39 ain't what it used to be, that's for sure. Federer will be 39 in August. But if tennis gets going again, he'll probably be unseeded for the Australian Open in 2021 because he played so little early this year. Now, he's going to have plenty of points because so many tournaments were canceled that he's going to keep the points. So I don't see how you'll be not seeded. If he had the 17 seed again, like in 2017, or maybe this time it's the 21st seed, either one of those I'd take as a good omen, a good sign that Federer is going to win, or at least have a good run at the Australian Open. So Brad Gilbert says that could be trouble if he's unseeded. Federer seems willing to take that risk. It might be that he'd rather spend the next few months plotting a sequel to 2017 than hoping for a relaunch of the ATP Tour. I think Federer is relieved that he doesn't have to answer all these questions like Djokovic is going to have to, that he doesn't have to put his face out there and damage his own brand by saying, I don't want to go to the U.S. Open without, although he did kind of already say he didn't like the restrictive measures, but not too big of a deal. Point is, Federer is going to avoid all the craziness. This no-fan U.S. Open, who knows how that would have affected top players like Roger Federer, who are so used to getting all that crowd support. I think it's kind of a no-brainer for him to skip all of this stuff and guarantee he is 100% fit and ready to go. And Herr Peter Bodo kind of says that right here. Perhaps those restrictions, talking about all the stuff with the U.S. Open and the restrictions for COVID-19, help explain why Federer in his announcement of his plans via Twitter didn't seem too discouraged. Now, This is from Roger Federer. Now, much like I did leading up to the 2017 season, I plan to take the necessary time to be 100% ready to play at my highest level. I'll be missing my fans and the tour dearly, but I'll be looking forward to seeing everyone back on tour at the start of the 2021 season. Brad Gilbert said, we're in uncharted territory here. The way guys are training and taking care of themselves, sure, Ken Rosewall, Jimmy Connors, they both played in majors after turning 39, but today's game is more physical and the players are tougher. When you take that much time off, and he cites Juan Martín del Potro as evidence, even at 25, 26, it can take 6 months to get your mojo back. It's not like you can take your time at 39, especially if you're not protected by seeding. But, I'm surprised that Brad Gilbert's saying that because doesn't he know Roger Federer well enough to know that, once Federer is ready to start training, he can pretty much fly in all kinds of tennis talent right to wherever he is at the moment. He could be in Dubai, he could be in Switzerland, who knows. He's going to be able to fly in all kinds of talent and get tip-top. I mean, after seeing what happened in 2017, Brad Gilbert was there. He had a front row seat to it. How is he so surprised? I guess the extra age, a few years makes a difference, but, it's only been a few years. Gilbert does explain that Roger might be also thinking about tweaking his game a little bit. Think Neo backhand of 2017. He says, quote, he may want to tweak or work on his game, but it's pretty risky at this stage. Fed is pretty quiet about those kinds of things, talking about what happened when things didn't go well in his recovery from the first procedure, having to have a second operation on his knee. He may have wanted to figure out where he is and suffered a compensation injury because he had been favoring the other leg. If one, I believe this is the right knee for Roger Federer, if that knee is bothering you, it's not, or maybe it's not even bothering you, it's just not as strong as the left leg, or you're overly cautious in protecting it, you can end up hurting the left leg, in Roger's case, because you're putting extra weight on that. That is definitely a thing that happens with tennis when you're coming back from injury. So he puts that out there, and Herr Peter Bodo finishes with, this might prove to be a final point of no return for Roger Federer should his efforts in 2021 fall short, but it could also result in a final, glorious chapter that he would not have had a chance to write were it not for the shutdown of the game due to the coronavirus pandemic. One thing we know is that Federer, who anticipated a hunger for team events and started the wildly successful Laver Cup to satisfy it, knows an opportunity when he sees it. And Peter Bodo nailed it right there. I think Roger Federer has taken the opportunity to come back 100% truly. Also, it does sound like he had a setback, but why test it out? Why try to force anything, especially with this, what are we going to have? What kind of U.S. Open? What kind of French Open? Who knows how this is even going to go? I have a feeling if the U.S. Open were to somehow move forward without any star power and there's no crowds there, it's going to be what Marin Cilic said in the beginning. You're going to have somebody win that you would never expect to win a major, and it's not going to feel like a passing of the torch from the big three who will be totally absent. It's going to feel like it needs an asterisk next to it saying doesn't really count as a Grand Slam win. All right, this next article, we don't have time to do this. Maybe we'll do it on Monday, especially if the news is just, U.S. Open canceled. Sorry. We'll save this for Monday. It's Roger Federer fans. Time to start accepting that your guy's number 3 by Simon Brutti. So we'll do that disgusting little thing next time. Put this up really quick. I got to take a look because I just got this recently. This is great. I said, fact-checked wrong on an article a couple weeks ago when we did our last show, and that Rafa Nadal is 34 years old. He was still 33. He was only a few days away from being 34. This is from Phil Anon. 1 week ago, he said, I challenged the call, Matt. Let's go to the Hawkeye review. It's zooming in. Closer, closer. It's out. Rafa is still 33, but yes, only just. Confirming my casual tennis nerd status, I knew Rafa was born June 3rd, 1986. Mr. Anon has 3 challenges remaining. Dennis Daly added, that ball is on the line. All right, so good job. You got me on that one. And then this was pretty funny. I got a comment. I actually don't have it. I'm sorry. I can't say who it was. I can't remember. But I got a comment saying, are you going to talk about Stefanos Tsitsipas? Tsitsipas got in trouble a little bit. Nobody's going too hard on him. Here's the original post from this guy named Matt Haig. And he screenshots all these posts where I guess he writes books. And this is something he wrote in one of his books. He's like a British journalist or writer or something. I'm not familiar with him. He said, I wrote all these words. Nice to know someone else likes them. Happens a lot. But I have a short name. It's quite easy to credit. Steph Tsitsipas clearly had word for word copied in 3 pretty long tweets, pretty much maxed out for the amount of space you're allowed to take up with a tweet. He pretty much maxed out and copied this guy, Matt Haig, word for word. But Matt Haig did say, I'm genuinely not cross, proof that he's an Englishman. Don't pile on the guy. Imitation is flattery. And Steph Tsitsipas did put a tweet out saying, I just wanted to give a shout out to Matt Haig for the great words of wisdom. I posted your words as they are informative and in a way educational. Thank you and apologies for not tagging you beforehand. No worries at all, Stefanos. Have a good day. I think a lot of people wouldn't be so forgiving. So luckily for Stefanos, it wasn't a big deal for him, but maybe be careful next time you go tweeting words you admire. Steph Tsitsipas. We're very good here at attributing what we're reading. Hit the music. We're getting out of here. This show started because I thought people... Well, I told you earlier, I started this show because I wanted to make something that I thought would be fun to watch for me as a tennis fan, and I thought other tennis fans out there might appreciate it. In our first video, it was about all the people panicking that Federer was losing it because he lost to Tommy Haas. Do not forget, this is from ATPTour.com. Former world number 2, right? It's pretty hard to be number 2, was 39. You can do great things at age 39. Maybe when Federer wins Wimbledon next year or the Australian Open or both, he'll prove that as a 39-year-old. World number 2, Tommy Haas was 39 when he competed at the 2017 Mercedes Cup in Stuttgart. Haas had undergone his 9th surgery the previous April. Federer's only had 3. And he entered the tournament searching for form during his final season. The German had not won back-to-back matches in 3 years in 2014 Rome. Of course, you know he won it. Tommy Haas said, I'm a little bit speechless that I beat him today. It's been a while since I have won back-to-back matches. To do it against Roger is obviously one of my career highlights. It's a very special feeling. Roger probably a little stinging from defeat after having match points and winning more points than his opponent in a match he lost. We've seen that plenty of times. He said, quote, Tommy definitely played well when he had to. So, there you go. Just had to throw it back to the beginning of the show. I thought it was a heartwarming story, and it goes to show you can still do a lot, like take down the hottest player on the tour when you're 39 and coming off of multiple surgeries. We will be back on Monday. Make sure you click the link down below and sign up for the Coffee Break Tennis news list. If for some reason we're not going to be here on Monday, you'll find out first in your email box when you click the link down below and pop your email in. We'll take good care of you, I promise. See ya!